The ascended Jesus, who sits at the right hand of the Father, is now the one who is ruling in the Father's name, who is now directing affairs upon the earth.
But here we are. I don't know if you know this, but Jesus appears to his disciples 13 times. He shows himself alive 13 times. He shows himself that death was not the end of him, that he conquered death. He rose from the grave, and he reveals himself to the disciples 13 times. In fact, in the first reading, it says that he presented himself alive to them with many proofs. And so when it came to the disciples and their faith, Jesus had demonstrated the truth we talked about last weekend, that he is who he says he is. That Jesus had made it clear that there would be no doubt in their minds. Okay, Jesus is who he says he is. There's no discussion. There's no questions left to be answered. Jesus has proven, again, as it says, he presented himself alive to them by many proofs. And the disciples believe this. In fact, that's why in Acts chapter 1, here they are. Jesus walks up to Bethany, and they're looking out over the city of Jerusalem. And they ask him the question. They know who he is, so they ask him the question, Lord, are you at this time going to restore the kingdom to Israel? They know that he's the king. They know that he is the answer. They know that he is the one they've been longing for, praying for, the promised Messiah. They know this. That's why they ask him this question. Lord, are you going to, at this point, going to establish the kingdom on earth, essentially? So they know. They believe. They have faith. And I love this because Jesus, his answer is basically, no, I'm not. You are going to.
I think it would do well for every parish, every Catholic school, every university, every whatever, to spend some time very deliberately, very intentionally every year making sure we just proclaim the gospel. There's a couple reasons for this. Most importantly, because the gospel is power. Not the messenger of the gospel is power. The proclamation of the gospel is power. It changes lives. The Greek word Paul uses there is the word from which we get the word dynamite. In other words, the gospel isn't just news, let alone ordinary news. The gospel is extraordinary, unexpected, life-changing news.
I'm going to talk about the reasonableness of Catholicism, and I'm going to root it and kind of base it in 3 of the top 5 most popular podcasts on Spotify in the US, right? So the top 5 podcasts in the US on Spotify. Joe Rogan, Armchair Expert, some News One, Crime Junkie, that like all the women listen to and then they freak out when they're home alone. Let's think about that. And Call Her Daddy, right? These are the top 5. And I realize we're gonna be good about it. Like it's like some like edgy waters. But the reality is that if we look at this population here, and what I'm gonna talk about specifically are Armchair, Call Her Daddy, and I'm gonna talk about Joe Rogan. The reality is, although this is a Catholic group, almost for sure, all of these podcasts have been listened to by a majority of the people here, depending on the demographic. And all of them have proposed something or some sort of worldview that undermines the Catholic and the Christian proposal, and we want to look at it. So the first one is Joe Rogan, right? And Joe Rogan, he's popular. And one of the reasons that people like him so much is he's kind of judged to be intellectually honest, or there like seems to be some like intellectual integrity. He'll have people on from different sides. He'll ask tough questions. But to be honest, there's like a pretty big blind spot. And I think that he has a pretty big blind spot when it comes to Christianity and Catholicism. And he's like pretty solid and asks good, hard questions. But multiple times he's proposed this book. I think the title of it's something like The Sacred Mushroom and the Cross. And he's proposed, and sort of as a valid argument proposal, that Christianity is basically the fruit of somebody doing mushrooms for a bunch of people. It's like, Joseph, Rogan, come on. Raise the Catholic.
So we start with P, politicization. We have persuaded most Americans to treat their religion as a kind of politics and their politics as a kind of religion. In the People's Republic of Massachusetts, the Catholic Church used to be defined as the Democratic Party at prayer. In Iowa, it's the Republican Party at prayer. Treating politics religiously is, of course, a form of idolatry, and all forms of idolatry are deeply gratifying to us. So it doesn't matter to us whether they worship the donkey or the elephant, as long as they don't worship the enemy.
Yes, I am presenting the position as I've experienced it so often. Well, first of all, as I said, I'm going to be positive. I want to focus on love and fairness. And who in this room does not like love and fairness? Could you raise your hand? Yeah. Same-sex marriage is not so much winning the hearts of America and Americans. I would say it's already won the hearts of most Americans. Most Americans, including, I would venture to guess, most Catholics, are sympathetic to the idea of gay marriage. So if this is the case, I'm going to argue that all of you in this room right now, even if you would say that you believe that marriage is the union of one man and one woman, deep down inside, I believe you know that this is a just cause. Now, I don't believe that personally, but I am sharing with you how somebody might approach you in an apologetics context. They might appeal to this sort of innate belief in fair play and fairness. They might say, you know deep down inside that it's not fair to prevent one group of people from being able to get married and another group of people can't, simply because a book written thousands of years ago by goat herders in a language you don't even speak says so. And for that matter, as we'll get into in the next section, the interpretation that you impose as a Christian on these verses in the Bible, that's unique to Christianity, but not everybody holds that view. So how is it fair, Father Mike, how is it fair for you to say, sorry, because we interpret the Bible this way, this whole group of people does not get to get married because we say so? How is that fair? How is that American to say that to other people?
Step up, Father, step up. Not out.
What are all these people doing here? I zoned out. Just that's not true. That's a fantastic question. In fact, I really love the fact that Patrick phrased it in this way. Is that y'all have a feeling that this is just there's something wrong about denying a certain group access to marriage. Doesn't it kind of make you feel bad? And if you're like, I'm Catholic, yeah, don't you kind of feel bad for being Catholic? I mean, don't you kind of feel bad that you are on the wrong side of this whole thing? And that's nope. So it's like, but that is it's a really powerful thing because no one wants to be mean. I imagine there are many parents here, and you've probably had the case where one of the other person, your spouse, you're maybe the dad. You come home, and while you were away, one of your children did something bad, and your wife corrected the child and said, "Wait till your father gets home." And you walked in there, or could flip it around, doesn't matter. You walked in, and so you didn't have the emotional, like, what, I can't believe you just did that to your little sister kind of a thing, like, finger paint doesn't come off that easily. And they said, you need to do something to punish your child. And you're like, I don't want to be the bad guy. I don't want to be the one who comes in and has to say no to people, because no one likes being the bad guy except for jerks. They like being the bad guy. And so when Patrick says, you probably all know this. You know that this is wrong. I don't think it's this is wrong. I think no one likes being the bad guy. everyone wants to be like able to say, yeah, go ahead and finger paint your sister. That's no problem. Markers, doesn't matter if they're permanent or not. And yet we know that there's got to be some kind of parameters. And that's why I think this is really important, because I think most Americans have felt their way through this issue. We haven't thought our way through this issue. We have felt our way through this issue. We haven't thought our way through this issue. And it all comes down to, as Patrick said, it's not fair to prevent people unlike you, a whole group of people unlike you maybe, from marriage or to get married, prevent them from marriage. And I would say that's a great question, or that's a great point. The question I have to ask is, well, what is marriage? Because unless we know what marriage is, then it's a nonsensical statement. It's unfair of you to prevent a whole group of people from flimmity-flimming. Just so unfair. Why are you saying so many people can't flimmity-flimming? Unless we know what marriage is. So what I want to do is to say, like, okay, what is marriage in the first place? Actually, I think it was Justice Kennedy, when this came up before the Supreme Court, he had said this. He said, every definition that, this is Justice Roberts, it said every definition he looked up prior to about a dozen years ago defined marriage as a unity between a man and woman as husband and wife. He goes on to say, so you're not seeking, so someone's seeking, but we want to be married too. It says, so you're not seeking to join the institution. Because every definition up until a dozen years ago, every definition throughout every culture, every time period, everyone has defined marriage as between a man and a woman, husband and wife. He points out, so those who are seeking to marry members of the same sex, he says, you're not seeking to join an institution, you're seeking to change what the institution is. Not seeking to join the institution. So again, when it comes down to it, the church wouldn't say we're on the side of preventing people from getting married. No, we want to say, before we redefine this, let's define it. That's the big thing when it comes to talking with people. Before we redefine this, let's define it. So if I may I define, or should you want to? All right then. It'll take about 20. How much minutes do we have? 20 minutes.
Yeah.
I would say this. In order to define this, let's do a little biology 101. I think this is important. Let's get as basic as we possibly can. And some of you are like, oh my gosh, this is all the way back to stuff I knew in second grade. Well done. You were advanced for a second grader. So in biology 101, if you were to do this, if you were to take an individual, and here's Jack. Have Jack stand right up here. So, okay, as you looked at Jack, what you would see a human person who's whole and entire in and of himself. He's a biological unity. He is complete in and of himself. Here's Jack. Jack's body is a biological unity. He's whole and complete in and of himself. Every biological system has everything it needs to fully function. So his limbic system, everything in Jack's body is there to fully function. His digestive system, everything in Jack's body is there to fully function. His cardiovascular system, everything in Jack's body, he has everything he needs for his entire body to be a unity. Every one of his systems is whole and complete, except for one. Which biological system in Jack's body is not complete on its own? His reproductive system. So what does Jack need to have a unity in his reproductive system? He needs another body. But does he just need any other body to have the unity in his reproductive, in wholeness in his reproductive system? He doesn't need just any other body. He needs a complementary body. He needs a complementary body. If he's going to have unity, wholeness in and of his reproductive system, he needs a female body. And same with comes to Jane. Jane needs a male body when it comes to her reproductive system. So in order to achieve a certain biological unity, you need another body, but not just any other, a complementary body. Again, this is written into our very nature, into our very bodies. So this is one of those kind of things, is we get to this. What is an essential element of marriage? Well, it's this. It's a biological unity oriented towards the creation of new human life. A biological unity oriented towards the creation of new human life. But a lot of people say these things. No, it's not. Father, you have no idea. It's about love. So marriage is all about love. You should be able to let people get married because they love each other. And I said, that's a great point. Wonderful point. And we don't want to deny love. Here's the question. Are all human relationships that involve love, are they all marriage? Not at all. And so to say that there are two human beings or more who have a loving relationship, do we need to call that marriage? No, because we know that love is not the distinctive characteristic of marriage. It doesn't belong solely to marriage. Okay, so maybe it's this, maybe it's commitment. Maybe it's, it's not just love, it's a commitment for a whole life. But we know this, we know that commitment isn't the sole essential element of matrimony or of marriage. Because we have a lot of human relationships that involve commitment. What about mutual support? Like there's a sense of like, there's not only love, there's not only commitment, there's also this mutual support. And I remember I live right down the street from a Benedictine monastery. And the nuns who live in this Benedictine monastery, they love each other. They have a level of commitment to each other and to the Lord, and they have a level of mutual support that they have for each other. Now, will we call that marriage? So no, because it's lacking even more still in its even more essential element. What about exclusivity? And here's where we're going to get to like where we're landing. Because what we're going to hear a lot of times is this. What we're going to hear is that you're denying someone love, the ability to commit to each other. You're denying someone that mutual support and respect that they get. No one's denying those things. Those things are all good things, and those things are all immediately accessible without the intervention of a redefinition of what marriage is. All of those things, love, commitment, support, exclusivity, those are all immediately accessible without redefining what marriage is. Exclusivity. What if you had, here I got this from a book I read a little while ago. What if you had two tennis pairs? They're tennis partners. And they decided, you know what? I'm committed to you. I will never play tennis unless I'm playing with you. I'm exclusive in this. I know this is kind of a trite example, but like, I'll never play tennis unless I'm playing tennis with you. That would be exclusive. Would that be a marriage? No. What about this? What if someone were to say, I will never hold hands with anyone else other than you. I'll never hold hands the rest of it, as long as I live, with anyone other than you. That's exclusive. It's a commitment. But that's still not marriage. What if someone were to say, I will never hug another person as long as I live other than you? We still say that's still lacking something. What if you were to say, I will never rub up against sorry, but
I think we get the point, Father.
Yes, you got it. Yeah, I need to take a break. 1 sec.
Yeah. So.
All right. Well, that sounds well and good. But there's a certain phrase, all men are created equal. We redefine that to include black people who are excluded from the understanding in days gone by of a whole class of people being created equal, aka white people. And in our culture, we progress to the point where we realize that's stupid. It also includes black people. And so we do see advances in our society and improvements by redefining things that are either outmoded, antiquated, or simply wrong. So when somebody says to you, well, why would we resist redefining something if we can redefine it and make it better?
Great question. Thank you. I think this is fantastic. Great and fantastic point, because that's what a lot of people will say. We used to have these other laws that prevent certain groups of people from getting married. So why not continue to redefine this? And you could say this, if you were to do some research across the entire East and West, every epoch, every era, what you'd find is that when it comes to marriage, there are certain things that are universals, certain things that are always there, certain things that are near universals that virtually every culture, virtually every time period, they're there. And there are certain things that are variables, that they're sometimes there, sometimes not. But it's so erratic and it's so changeable that they're complete variables. And the history of the United States is one of those things when it comes to this issue, when it comes to restricting marriage based off of race. There are cultures that practice endogamy. And the endogamy is basically you can only get married in your own group. And that doesn't have to be race, it can be religion. So if you're Christian, only marry other Christians. If you're a Jew, only marry other Jews. This endogamy, no, that's not unjust, strictly speaking, because you have other cultures that have exogamy, which is you can only marry people out of your group. Those things are cultural variables, and they always change. In fact, they're artificial. They're not intrinsic, and they're not essential to what a marriage is. That's why I would say, like, when it comes down to it, what makes marriage unique? Is it love? Is it commitment? Is it exclusivity? Is it physical exclusivity? What kind of physical exclusivity? It is this. It is the union of hearts and minds and wills oriented towards a biological unity, oriented towards the creation of new human life. So it's the commitment of one's whole life involving this biological unity oriented towards the creation of new human life. This is like the essential element of matrimony that makes it different than any other human relationship that we know of. What is it? The sexual embrace.
Wait a doggone minute. What about all those contracepting Catholics out there? You've got so many Catholics, most of them most likely, who are contracepting. They're not open to life. They're not having children. What about the older people who are biologically beyond the time of childbearing? The church permits and celebrates their love, enshrines it in marriage if they want to be married. So if whole huge swaths of the Catholic Church are closed off to life, the biological ordering that you're describing here, then why is it intrinsically okay for them to be married, but it's not okay for people, two men, for example, or two women? Why is it not okay for them to be married?